Okay, guys, so today we are going to be doing two-column geometric proofs. So make sure you have your Springboard book to page 66 and then something to write with because we're going to be doing lots of proofing today. So let's get started. So on page 66, they're going to start by taking our theorem that we already know about vertical angles. That says vertical angles are congruent, okay? And they're going to use a two-column proof, okay, to prove that that's actually true. So if you go through this really quick, they use a lot of things using definitions, okay, like the definition of supplementary angles. If they say angle 1 and angle 3 are supplementary, then they equal 180 degrees. Same thing with angle 2 and angle 3, okay? If you add those together, they're supplementary, so they equal 180. So by the substitution property, or kind of like that transitive property, if angle 1 plus angle 3 is the same as angle 2 plus angle 3, then angle 1 must equal angle 2. We can kind of cancel out the ones that they have in common or subtract it away, as your book is kind of doing. And that gives us that our two angles are equal, meaning that they are congruent. Okay. So let's look at this example B down here. So they're calling it a guided proof because most of it's filled in, but not all of it. So we're going to kind of fill in the blank here. So our given is that angle A and angle B are right angles. Okay. We want to prove that angle A and angle B are congruent. So what we're always going to start with when we do proofs is the given statement. So whatever they give you, we write that first. So what they told us is that angle A and angle B are right angles. Okay, that's given. We always start with our givens. Okay, next they're going to say that angle A is 90 degrees and angle B is 90 degrees. Okay, and how do they know that? Well, that's our definition of right angles. Okay. So if we know something is a right angle, we know it's 90 degrees. So in that sense, since the measure of angle A is equal to the measure of angle B, and that's by our transitive property, okay? If angle A equals 90 degrees and angle B equals 90 degrees, then angle A has to be equal to angle B. And then since we prove that they are equal, then we prove that they are congruent. Okay, that's the definition of congruent angles. Okay, so a proof is just kind of a step-by-step list of justifications to actually have us turn something into something that we need to prove into an actual fact. Okay, we showed all the steps and our justifications why everything is true. Okay, so let's look at the next one. So it says complete the proof. Q is a midpoint of PR. QR is congruent to RS. So those are our given statements. They want us to prove that PQ is congruent to RS. So the one main thing I'm going to say a bunch of times, okay, anytime we start with a proof, I want you to mark your drawing. Okay, mark anything that's congruent. Mark things if you know something's a midpoint, you know that divides it into two equal parts. Okay, so mark your drawings up so you can kind of give yourself like some little clues here and there about how we can set up our proof. So it says Q is a midpoint of PR. So if it's a midpoint, I know that PQ and QR have to be equal to each other. If it's a midpoint, it divides it evenly into two parts. Okay, they also told us that QR is congruent to RS. I'm just going to kind of mark those with a little V-shaped thing. Okay, so now that we have everything marked, we need to fill in the reasons here. So they did the statements for us. We're going to fill in the right side with the reasons. So Q is the midpoint of PR. Well, our reason for that is that's a given. Okay, they told us that right here. Okay, and PQ is congruent to QR. Well, how did we know that PQ was congruent to QR? Well, we use the definition of a midpoint, right? Okay, so that's how I knew that those two were congruent. So that's why I made those tick marks on my drawing. Okay, our next statement says QR is congruent to RS. That was another given statement. Okay, they told us that. That's how we knew it. Okay, so if we look at this now, so we know, let's maybe write this way. PQ is congruent to QR, and QR is congruent to RS. So how do we now know that PQ is congruent to RS? What property tells us that we can do that? Kind of eliminate that middleman in there. Well, that's our transitive property that we've talked about. Okay. So a proof is just a list of statements with justifications from definitions, postulates, theorems, anything that we can use that we know to kind of help us say why a statement is what it is. Okay. So I'm going to have you guys take a second and do the one on the bottom. So the statements are given for you. I'm sorry, the justification's already there for you, but we need to fill in the statements. So in this case, we have two angles, angle 1 and angle 2, and they tell us they are supplementary. Okay. And they also tell us the measure of angle 1 is 68 degrees. They want you to prove what's the measure of angle 2. So I'm going to have you guys try this one, kind of pause the video here, see if you can fill in those statements there to kind of go with those reasons that they have on the right. Okay, so two angles are supplementary. That's our given. Okay, so if they're supplementary, that definition tells us that they must be equal to 180 degrees. Then we have our next given statement that measure of angle 1 was 68 degrees. So if I have 68 degrees plus my second angle, they have to equal 180 degrees. So they're calling that a substitution property. Okay, I substituted in for angle 1. And then finally, by the subtraction property of equality, I can solve that for the measure of angle 2, okay, which is 112. So we might have been able to do that, without doing this list of reasons, but that's the whole point of a proof, is to justify why we're doing each step. Okay, let's see what we have next. Okay, next they're going to give us everything we need, the statement and the reason, and we're going to order them, okay, in logical order. So they want us to prove this theorem. If two angles are complementary to the same angle, then the two angles are congruent. So we have a given that angle A and angle B are complementary to angle C. Okay, so that's probably, so we have all these reasons, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 reasons. We're going to order these here in order, okay, with which statement comes first and which statement's last. So let's think. If we're always going to start with a given, I'm going to start with this first given statement, that they're complementary to each other. Okay, that's a given. So that's going to be my first statement. So then what can I use with that? Okay, if I know that they're complementary, how can I use that to give me a new statement? Well, I can probably figure out that if they're complementary, then they must be equal to 90 degrees, right? That's what we know about complementary angles. Okay. And then we just got to think now, how can we use that step on the next one? Well, if I know that angle A plus C is 90 and B plus C is 90, then by the transitive property, we can say that A plus C is equal to B plus C. Okay. Next step, then, that proves that those angles are congruent. Okay, they have the same measure, they're equal, which in the end will prove congruence. Okay, so once you prove something is equal, then you can prove that they're congruent to each other. Okay, now the answer is just below us. So I'm going to have you guys try the next one, this number C. Okay, arrange those statements and reasons, and you can just kind of number them on the side, 1 through 4, okay, to logically order and complete the proof. So it says our given is angle 1 and angle 2 are vertical angles. We also know that angle 1 is going to be equal or congruent to angle 3. You want to prove that angle 2 and angle 3 are congruent. So go ahead and take a second here on your own and try to arrange those statements in the right order. Okay, so here's what I got. So I'm going to start with my given that angle 1 and angle 2 are vertical angles. We're going to start there. And then think about how you can use that statement to get you the next logical statement. Okay, so there should be kind of a domino effect here. So we know that vertical angles are congruent. So that's probably going to tell me that angle 1 and angle 2 have to be congruent to each other. Okay, so the next, I'm going to take my next given statement where I know that angle 1 and angle 3 are congruent. And then by the transitive property, I can prove my statement that angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. Okay, last problem we're probably going to do today is B, where B is having us write a 2-column proof of the following theorem. So if 2 angles are supplementary to the same angle, then the 2 angles are congruent. So they have a given statement here, angle R and angle S are supplementary to angle T. They want you to prove that angle R is congruent to angle S. So it's really similar to the one from example C on the previous page, okay, because that one was just proving complementary angles, so it's really similar. So use that to kind of guide you. So I'm going to have you guys try this first on your own. So I made just a quick little T-chart to the right. So you have your statements on the left and your justifications on the right. Make sure you kind of number them as you go and keep them kind of lined up as best you can. And my little hint I'm going to tell you is you should have 5 statements. Okay. So go ahead and try that right now. Okay, so I'm going to go through it, and we'll see if we kind of matched here. So I'm always going to start with my given, which says that angle R and angle S are supplementary to angle T. And that's our given. Okay, so next, think about how you could use that to help you out. So if R and T are supplementary, that means if we add them together, they equal 180 degrees, right? Similarly with angle S and angle T, we add those together, we get 180 degrees. And our justification here is that's the definition of supplementary angles. That's why we can do that. Okay, so now let's think about how we can use that to get us in our next step. Okay. So since we know that these both equal 180 degrees, then I know, I'm going to try to make this a little thinner here, that angle R plus angle T is equal to angle S plus angle T, since they are both equal to 180 degrees. And why can we do that? That's kind of our transitive property here that lets us do that. Okay. Now, how does that help me? Well, the end goal here, now I can kind of say that I know that angle R is equal to angle S, okay, by subtraction property. If I subtract out angle T from each of those, then I'm just left with angle R equal to angle S. And then I get my final conclusion here. If those are equal, equal implies congruence. So that's the definition of congruence. If something is equal, then they are congruent to each other. Okay. So the whole lesson today is just based really around being able to take our logical statements, okay, our justifications, and putting them into a proof, okay? That way we can start with the statement and work our way down, again, kind of like a domino effect. How can step 1 help you to get step 2, and so on, till you get to that statement that you were trying to prove, okay? So just be really careful and cognizant of all the definitions we've learned so far, okay? Use those vocab sheets if you still need, but you pull out anything you've got with definitions, think about the angles, draw pictures. If you have a diagram, mark it up, okay? Anything you can do to help you out.